This week, we're going to talk about the difference between an appraisal and market value for a home. We get this a lot where we talk to people and they say that they've had either, they've had it appraised, where they're getting their numbers from, and all of those different things. But sometimes the disconnect and misunderstanding of what is an appraisal versus what your home would sell for in the open market. And so this week, just really want to kind of dig into that. So let's go ahead, let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Bill Stewart with Remax Moves here with the Bill Stewart Homes team. We are in Simpsonville, South Carolina. We've actually had quite a few conversations over the last few days. And a lot of times it's the same theme that we talk pretty much almost all the time, where it's, the idea of this understanding of market value, that, talking with sellers about what the price is, and sometimes really just having to navigate the understanding of what is the list price. Why would you list a home at a certain price point versus another price point? And sometimes the contradiction of like what we're saying or what I am suggesting in terms of a list price versus what, they're getting from, say, an appraiser or like some other method in terms of valuation. So really just want to talk about the idea of, market value really is boiled down to, it's what a buyer in the marketplace, what a buyer and seller are willing to sell the property for and what a buyer is willing and able to pay for it. And so understanding the market and understanding where buyers, not only where they have made offers in the past, but what are they doing currently in the market? And then at that point, how do we start to project what the future is going to look like in terms of showing activity and just the metrics that we can see behind the scenes that help us, and when we're formatting kind of what's our strategy from a list price. Because honestly, it doesn't matter what you've got. And I've talked about this in several videos. If you are not priced well in this market, the home will sit. We have a lot of inventory that's sitting out there right now, where at the end of it, really what it boiled down to is the fact that it was a misunderstanding of price and pricing to the market that they're in. Not saying that the idea of like what your actual marketable value is that at that point, like that you have to do anything. Sometimes that is a clear that is part of the interview process for us, is to really determine kind of, is it the right time for that seller to be in the market, based off of the goals of what they're trying to accomplish. Or at that point now connecting the dots where it's understanding your market value, but then the other is that market value is also, and the market conditions are also affecting other properties. So in terms of what's the net benefit potentially, if we were able to get your house under contract, would you have more negotiating room on the buyer side? So what you perceivably thought, potentially that you needed in order to get there, you may not have needed as much as you thought. So at that point, you're able to win on both sides. We're in a market where that's allowing that to happen. In fact, I just had a client a couple weeks ago. They're moving from Florida. I've been working with them for quite some time, and we found a house that they absolutely love, and we were able to negotiate a $30,000 price reduction off of their list price. Now, reality is, it's not that we were really like going after or undercutting the price. It was that we realized that there was no other comp in that neighborhood that supported the price they were asking for. And the buyer put an offer out that in essence, like, was comfortable for them. And so at the end of it, what we thought our budget was going to be, they ended up getting a great house at what I would consider fair market value. And the seller agreed, and we've gone through due diligence, and we will close in the middle of November. So there's opportunity out there in this market to, at that point, like, you're perceivably giving up on one side, but you're also potentially able to gain on the other side. And so it really boils down to speed and time. But going back to what our original concept was, the idea of what is an appraisal? What's the intent of an appraisal? I just had that question this morning from somebody who I'm going out to meet on Friday. What is your appraisal process? Which I understand what he's asking. What is the process that I use in order to be able to price a home? But that we use this term market value and appraisal value almost in interchangeable terms, as if they mean the same thing, and they really don't. What an appraisal is basically an evaluation of your property up against like properties. They'll typically, banks will do this, lenders will do this. What they're trying to do is establish what a baseline would be in terms of what they are comfortable based off of the market conditions, what they are comfortable to loan up to and or if a buyer were to come in and the house is appraised at $850,000 and a buyer was willing and able to pay $850,000, you have really no problem. It appraised at that number and you're in a good spot. But the idea of what that in the other is like the appraisal, if you're refinancing your property at that point, like what they're willing to give you, but there's also a whole bunch of other metrics that go along into that number, what they're willing to loan you based off the idea that if you're refinancing your house, chances are pretty high that you're going to stay in that house for some time. And so at that point, like just the natural appreciation of that property, they may be willing to loan you a little bit more in a refinance because of the fact that they understand that they've got that you as the seller are kind of the captive audience for that property and you're going to be staying there for a little bit of time. So they know that you're going to be making your payments. And the other is that you're also making a majority of your payments are interest loaded in the front end of that loan. And so at that point, it's a win-win for the bank as well. So, but it does not mean market price. So we're looking at a bunch of different data points when we're talking with sellers about how to price in this market. And I see a lot of things where I hear agents are offering, my agent had an appraiser come out and do something. And I think that's a huge, I don't necessarily, unless I'm not saying that there's not a time and place for it, but I think that, if we as agents don't understand the market and we're asking for an appraisal, in my opinion, I feel like then at that point, we're not really doing a good service to our client. It means we don't really understand the market. And at that point, like we're going to a third party source to come back with a number, which may or may not actually like work for us because, you could get approved for, I saw one where the replaceable value based off of what that appraisal came back at said that this property was worth $1 million. However, if they sold at $1 million, they would have been the most expensive property in that neighborhood by a pretty significant percentage. And that the reality, it wasn't that was impossible that they would get it, but the probability in terms of where we are within the supply and demand scale, considering what that property like had in terms of benefits, features, and compared to the other properties that were in and around, really priced this home more into an 875, 880 range from a list perspective. But we've already now at this point, the seller, depending on how that conversation went, could then at that point be under the assumption that their property's worth $1 million. They should list their property at $1 million and that they're going to get $1 million. And honestly, it did not work for the seller. And we are going to go out Friday and try to in essence, evaluate, and then at that point make a diagnosis as well as a recommendation on what would be. Now, whether or not they like our our plan or our strategy, at that point, that's going to be completely up to them. But the reality is, I think it was the conversation they probably needed to have up front, and they may have had better luck had they priced more appropriately into the market line and met where the demand was in order to be able to at that point get the home done. So we're talking about market value again. Like I said, appraisal not going to be my biggest. It's a great indicator in terms of where we are, and if we happen to get multiple offers, that we know kind of the parameters of where we can go to. But I'm not using an appraisal at all in my pricing model. I am strictly looking at looking backwards to see what has over a close timeline, what has happened. What homes have gone under contract, what homes have sold, what's the average, what have buyers been willing and able to pay, over say a 3 to 6 month period. I'm evaluating specifically my active listings because that will be, once we hit the market, that is who we're going to be competing with. The idea is that we are going into an open market format. We need to understand who our competition is. And a house that I looked at the other day where it was like to like, they were asking the same price, except for the fact that one house, the owner had put a $75,000 gable roof, covered patio onto the house, opening up into a really nicely landscaped backyard, for a $900,000 price point. And the seller that I was looking at the home that I was looking at, was a little bit smaller in square footage. They also didn't have, it would have created an environment where if I'm looking at these two properties, for the same amount of money, I'm going to get a done-for-me landscaping. I already have the outdoor porch. Where do we think buyers are really going to be motivated to make an offer if at the end of it I'm evaluating these two properties? And the reality is most of them are probably going to lean towards the guy who had made the improvements, and at that point that they're getting more value for the dollars that they're putting in. Not to say that the seller that we were working with would have not made a great return on their investment, but the idea is that you cannot compare the neighbor down the way to your home based on square footage alone. Otherwise, you will completely price yourself out of the market. You have to be completely detached in this process to, at that point, look at the property as a product and understand that you are selling a product on the open market and that there is only going to be one buyer that will end up taking over that property, but that no property is identical. It's not, there's no MSRP on homes. I use this all the time. It really boils down to the individual characteristics of each property. Just because you happen to be in proximity to somebody who sold for $900,000 doesn't necessarily mean that by default you are also going to sell for $900,000. So looking at all of the data points to say, okay, what happened in the past? What's happening currently? Where offers and where buyers making active offers in the market right now, and then taking a look at your buyer traffic to truly understand where are buyers, like where is the future buyer going to be? Because the past, they already bought the home. The present, they're already under contract. They've already made their decision on a property. So we're not going to be marketing to any of these people. We're marketing to the buyers who are going to make offers in the future. And we need to understand where they're looking and what they're doing. And then at that point, what properties are they going to be evaluating at the same time that we are? And so that, to me, I think the biggest difference is understanding appraisal is great as a barometer of just general value of what a bank would see, but what a buyer puts together is very different. And that's the difference between the market value and appraisal. But then when you start talking about the art form of listing, really there is an art form to it in terms of how you're looking at different search behavior, where are the buyers in the traffic patterns across different price segments, which listings are getting more activity, why are they getting more activity? And so some of this is going to be analytic. Some of it is also going to be really subjective. We're going to have to make phone calls. We're going to have to figure out things and make inferences on that information based off of how is the listing down the street? Are they able to share their traffic with us? Do we get an understanding of kind of how things are going to be before we hit the market in order to, at that point, place our property as the most obvious choice in this marketplace? And I think that's what separated us in this year, where we see, I hear a lot of different things about listings. I'm not getting any showings. I'm not getting this. I'm not getting that. And ultimately, it's not that there's anything wrong with the property. There's not anything wrong with the market. It's really the problem really boils down to is the interpretation of the current market and how we're setting our clients up for success. So anyway, if you have any questions or you're curious to know what your market value would look like, feel free, reach out to us. We would be more than happy to give you a non-commitment, just a walkthrough of what we're looking at and kind of give you a better understanding of what it would look like from a market value. If you're curious to know that, if you're interested to know anything about what's going on currently right now in the market, either in the Greenville area, Spartanburg area, upstate area as a whole, be more than happy to be able to share any information. We'll go through kind of a review of the market, in terms of what how we are faring up through the end of third quarter, probably in the next week or so. Just so that you can see, the market itself, transactions have been actually very strong. We just had a lot of inventory. And again, like I said, I don't think it's a market problem. It's more a misinterpretation of the market itself. And at that point, homes have been sitting for a little bit longer. So any questions, feel free, leave a comment. Would love to be able to engage with you. The other is we do this on a weekly basis. So please hit the like and subscribe button. Would love to continue to do this each week and different topics, across the board in real estate. So hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.